Good morning, everybody. My name is Melvin Escudero. I am the chairman for the Committee of Atlantic Island and Latin America Advocacy for the CFA Institute. It's my pleasure to be here with you for this special webinar that is starting our series of webinars that we are planning to do in the region for the rest of this year. 2021 is a very special year. After passing one of the biggest crises in the history of the planet, we are now preparing to recover and preparing to do big changes, not only in the economic aspects, but also we are including social changes. One of the big trends is not only the technological change, but it's also everything related to sustainability, including, of course, diversity, gender inclusion, and all efforts related to the environmental protection. We are very happy to start our webinars with this one called Women in Investment Management for Latam and the Caribbean. And we are also very proud to have a very special and distinguished women personalities, professionals that will share her time with us and her experiences regarding their professional careers and also their vision and outlook for the current markets and the outcome of the next coming months and years. We are very happy really to have you, Carolina Mery, who is the CIO of AFP Habitat. Carolina is probably the most important woman running the largest portfolio in this region, over $55 billion. Thank you very much for being with us, Carolina. We are also with Nur Cristiani. She is the head of research at JP Morgan in Mexico. We also have Carolina Cavenaghi. She is the co-founder and CEO of Fin4She. And we are also with Audrey Tuckwell. She is the CEO of Scotia Group for Jamaica. And also we are with the top representatives of the CFA Institute. We have Margaret Franklin, the president and CEO of the CFA Institute, Sarah Maynard, who is the global head for inclusion and diversity in the CFA Institute, Daniel Gamba, the chair of the Board of Governors of the CFA Institute, Barbara Mainzer, the CFA Society Uruguay president, and me. We are really, again, proud to be on this event with all of you. Now I will introduce Margaret Franklin for his welcoming speech.
I stand before you, albeit virtually, as the first female president and CEO in the 74-year history of CFA Institute. Our past two board chairs were women, and we have gender parity on our board as well. We're really proud of that. And yet I continue to be regularly surprised and disappointed by the headlines about gender representation in our industry. Yes, we should celebrate the fact that Jane Fraser has been named the next CEO of Citi. She becomes the first woman to lead a major US bank. Well done, Jane. And yet a recent Morningstar report found that in the UK funds industry, there are more fund managers named Dave or David than there are women running these funds. There's some humor in that capricious factoid, except not really. A study by the Diversity Project found that less than 10% of the senior managers in the asset management world are female. Not acceptable. And CityWire reports that women fund managers have a much higher level of turnover than their male peers, at 42% versus 28%. This pandemic and its impact on the workplace and our home lives continues to have profound ramifications. The optimist in me wants to believe that the transformation and transition to working from home has opened the eyes of many and will hopefully lead to more flexible working arrangements on a permanent basis. That could and should help working parents balance their home lives and their careers. Yet juggling the demands of work, teaching kids from home, caring for elderly parents, and so much more will surely prove too much for some. We see the stresses in our workplace and among our colleagues. That troubles me, and I fear the burden falls more on women. Some will certainly leave the workforce as a result. And so, while it is indeed important to celebrate the progress by people like Jane Fraser, we continue to face sobering reality. We can reflect not only on the achievement of women, but also acknowledge the very real problems women have faced in their struggle for equality in society. And while women have faced daunting obstacles in the workplace, I know that I cannot relate or hope to truly understand the experiences of those who have suffered through centuries of systemic racism. And so I would bluntly say to you that I have failed, and we at CFA Institute have failed, to sufficiently broaden our focus on inclusion and diversity when it comes to race. But we can make this change now. We often speak of the CFA program as a great equalizer in our industry. You do not need any special connections to begin the program or have had to attend the right university to start down this path. Although this is not often said, you don't need to have studied a STEM subject either. In fact, having diverse disciplines and skill sets on our teams means we can serve clients better. We know that T-shaped skills, expert knowledge and experience, combined with an ability to collaborate with experts from other areas, produces better investment outcomes. Gender is certainly not a barrier to sign up for our program. Exposure to the opportunities presented by a potential career in finance remains a challenge for sure, but our program welcomes anyone willing to take on the endeavor. While our percentage of female charter holders has remained stubbornly flat for some years, I'm encouraged by the tremendous gains we've seen in the pipeline, our female candidates. In fact, we've reached gender parity among candidates in a number of our most important markets. And globally, more than 40% of our candidates are now women. While we proudly mark that progress, we must acknowledge that our program has not made deeper inroads with racially diverse potential candidates due to a lack of awareness of careers in finance or accessibility because of the cost of our exams. We know we must do more in those areas. We see a significant underrepresentation of people of color and women in senior positions in the investment industry. We know that women of color in financial services face a 90% drop-off from entry level to C-suite. We need to honestly confront the reasons for this. We need to truly listen to the real-life experiences of young, Black, diverse, and women investment management professionals who resort to opting out of the industry altogether as the only way to cope with the sometimes oppressive reality and environment they may experience. Societal norms are such that these topics are often avoided in the workplace, but we have to talk about them and share the responsibility for creating change. Each of us has to also work at a deeply personal level to consider and face our own biases, histories, and sensitivities in a brave new light. Like the hockey player learning yoga, it will be hard and it will take practice. In fact, a commitment to work for inclusion and against racism is a lifetime one. But we believe companies must face the reality of racism and gender discrimination at a systemic level, and that business leaders must be vocal and intentional about diversity and inclusion. More than this, as leaders in this industry, we must commit to action. This will actually be the real test. We at CFA Institute do not have the answers all figured out, not even close. But in the coming weeks, months, and years ahead, I commit to you that we will do better. We will, in the closing words of the CFA Institute's mission, work for the ultimate benefit of society. We will continue to seek action on improving diversity and inclusion in the investment management profession by working with all of our members on mindsets, programs, and initiatives that make change a reality.
For our next panel, I will introduce Barbara Mainzer. She is the CFA Society Uruguay President, and we're very happy to have you to moderate this panel. Go ahead, Barbara.
Thank you very much, Melvin. Good morning to all. Thank you for being here with us. CFA Institute is a truly diverse and global organization. The fact that our 5 speakers from CFA Institute are in 5 different countries is a testament to that diversity. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce today's panel. Our panelists represent 4 subsectors of finance: pension funds, research, banking, and fintech. They represent 4 countries, 3 different languages. These accomplished leaders will share with us their personal experience, the challenges they face because of being women, and what they and their companies are doing to empower women and make this a more diverse industry. Each of them will have up to 15 minutes. We will allow some time at the end for questions. If you have questions, please send them through the buttons at the bottom of the screen. Our first panelist is Carolina Mery. Carolina is the Chief Investment Officer of AFP Habitat, the largest private pension fund in Chile, with assets under management in excess of 55 billion. This leaves Carolina, in fact, as the largest female asset manager in Latam. She has been with the company for 15 years and has more than 20 years of experience in the Chilean pension fund system. Carolina is a mother of a 9-year-old girl. Carolina, thank you very much for being here with us. It's all yours.
Okay, first, good morning to all, and thank you for the invitation. You think my experience is interesting. I don't know, but I will try to give something interesting. Like Barbara said, I am the chief investment officer of the AFP Habitat, the largest pension fund in Chile, and I work for Habitat for more than 15 years at the moment. Just to give a very little overview, Chile have a fully funded capitalization system. The pension system is based on individual capitalization and managed by private institutions known as Pension Fund Administration, AFP in Spanish. These are public limited companies whose exclusive purpose is the management of pension fund. We only manage money for pension. Other characteristic of the system is the choice of administration. The work choose the institution that which to join and may change from one AFP to another every month if they want. That's a very different issue than other pension funds. The people can change from the one administration to other AFP. Today, Habitat in Chile manages 5 funds, highly diversified, with almost 50% of their assets outside of Chile. Habitat is the leader in AUMs with more than, like you say, $55 billion, representing more than 30% of the market, with only 18 of the participants. Leader in voluntary saving, with 20% share of all financial institutions in the country, and leader in clients in the most affluent segment. In 2013, we start a greenfield in Peru that today has 1 million clients and almost 4 billion AUMs and dollars. And on December 2019, we acquired Colfondos, AFP in Colombia, with 2 million clients and 3.7 AUMs dollar. This is a summary of Habitat and the student. And I work in AFPs all my life. I start like an analyst of local equity in AFP Cuprum, and after we take in charge the research department of AFP Cuprum. And I remember was with it's a team of 3 analysts, all men. I was the only woman in the team. This work was very important. My first boss, and now one of my friends, was very good friend, a good friend and good boss, who gave me the opportunity to expose all my abilities in a very man-style company. Maybe to say something more quickly. Before that, I started to work in Habitat, first developing a risk area, and 2 years after, I was in charge of the foreign equity area. When this position was free because someone left, I talked with my boss and I asked for it. And I had this position for more than 10 years. A lot, no? 10 years is a lot, but I never stopped to learn different things. In this position, I developed the alternative program that was new, interesting, and required to learn a lot of new things. And in the last 2 years, we are working in the real asset market, and that have another dynamic, other things and other approach that is very interesting and different than the past I learned. And from 2017, I'm a member of the board of Habitat Peru, but I'm involved in Peru from the first years, really. This position is very different. Like a member, like a member of the board, I need to be involved in different things, the strategy, commercial things, and you have a more complete view of the business. That's different. But what I really like is investment management. You are involved in a lot of different market, industry, deals. It's very dynamic. And in the case of Chile in particular, a very small market, when you work in an AFP, you really are involved in most of the big deals in the country. It's a very powerful position to this kind of industry. And I remember and in this, I remember my first interview with the CEO of my first job. He asked me how you feel about to manage a lot of money. I say perfectly, obviously, no, it's an interview, but when you make the first recommendation for $1 million, really, it's very scary. Was scary in this moment, and now it's not so scary, but it's a lot of responsibility, really. But it's very interesting. And if I need to give some recommendation about to be a woman in financial work, or maybe in other works of work, you need to be sure you can do the same or better than a man. You need to take the opportunities. Make clear to the people who need to know you want to have responsibility. You have to increase in your career. You are really interesting to know. It's very important because sometimes the people say, I don't think you really want to that because you're a woman, you're whatever. Have a mentor or a people to talk about your career, what do you want, or the different possibilities you have is very important, it's very helpful. And like say, and have a good partner make everything easier, really. It's an important thing. And sometimes you don't, my husband is my first fan, really, and that's very helpful. and not only for women, maybe for everyone to want to work, it's important to like what you do. I really like to go to work. I really like to work in Habitat, like my team, the people, the compromise with the fiduciary responsibility that Habitat have is very important for me. Habitat is very active in defense the right of minority shareholders and the better for the affiliates. I don't know how much you know about Chile, but if you know about AFP and Chile, Habitat is very recognized for this. And all the team and me in particular are very proud of that. And other things is very important for me. I'm very proud when my daughter explained what mom do. She say, my mom care the money to the old people have to buy food and medicine when they can not work. It's very simple, but I'm very proud about this. Management is very interesting. It's funny for me. It's a dynamic thing. But when you do this for this cause, is better. It's not the only things I like, but it's really better. And like the video we see, Habitat and I really think working team with men and women is more value. The diverse is so good, is to give a different approach. Is the discussion about the thing is more rich. I really like to have this. We have this, and now you see more women. We have more women in the teams. I really remember many times where I was the only woman in the seminar, in a meeting, in a table, in a travel, and now you don't have this, and it's very good. I'm very proud about this. And like Habitat, we are very proud of. We have 62% of the workers are women, 52% of the head are women, and maybe in more senior position in the first line, we only have 32%, but we expect to improve that. But the approach of Habitat is to choose the best people for each position. But like with this approach, we have these numbers. It's a very good diversified team, really. And that's it. That's my history. And thank you very much. Thank you, Barbara, Melvin.
Thank you very much, Carolina. Such an inspiring talk. And you're so well known for being tough, hard worker. And today you exposed the humble beginnings and maybe a story not everybody knew. Of course, I can give a recommendation, but when you do it, it's such a responsibility and it's scary, right? And something else also I want to say, thank you. When we invited you to this conference, you're so well known for being such a good negotiator, so good in one-on-one. And you said, but I am not good with a wider audience. This is one of the things I don't like. And anyway, you did it. So thank you very, very much, Carolina. And we're leaving questions for the end. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next Carolina. And so Carolina Cavenaghi is co-founder and CEO at Fin4She. She's responsible for leading and implementing projects to promote female protagonism and financial independence. After a long career in the corporate world in finance, Carolina founded Fin4She with the mission of promoting a transformation in the career and the life of women so that initiatives like this no longer need to exist in the future. Carolina has 2 boys, aged 2 and 4. Carolina, thank you very much for being here with us. It's all yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And it's a pleasure to be with so great and inspiring women here telling their stories. Carolina, I like it a lot to hear your story. And one thing I connected it was when you can give meaning in everything you do if you think other way. Like sometimes we think that we need to achieve the meaningful or something in different careers like NGO or something like this, and we can find this proposal and good will in everything you do. And it's so nice to see how you direct your proposal into your do, that is managing people for managing the money from those people. So I was very inspired. And I will tell a little bit about my story, and sorry about my English, that is not so good. I'm a Brazilian. I was born in a city in the countryside of São Paulo, moved to São Paulo when I was 18 years old. I started my career in a local bank, a Brazilian bank, as a trainee. And after I started my first job, I was going forward into different positions and companies. The last 10 years, I was in a global asset management, working in sales and marketing, and focusing a lot on investments. So this theme, investments, is really present in my life during all my career. So the transition was a lot because of my child. So when I was in the maternity leave of my second boy, I was thinking a lot about the presence and the mission of women in the companies, and what was causing a lot of women leaving their positions and having to decide of a career or of being a mother. And I always say that I needed to have two boys to start to think about diversity and gender equality, because I believe in our generation we do not think about a lot about that. I'm 37 years old and I started to work in 2016, and I guess I had this really strong inside me, like I have to have a job, I need to be someone. So you just go and do whatever it takes, whatever you have to do. And when I become a mother, I guess this theme came into my life in a stronger way. And I always say that I started to look to other women and to try to talk and see what they're going through and what I can do differently. So I started this project in an entrepreneur way. I decided to do an event that was Women in Finance, and also CFA was a partner for this event to happen in October of 2019. And I was expecting an event like this, like what are you doing here, but presence, because we did not have the pandemic in that time. And for my surprise, 800 women subscribed for participating in an event. It was in a local museum here in São Paulo. And so some lights came through, and I was thinking like what I could do and seeking for action. I would like to do something, but I needed to do something really, really like I have to be, I need to do a commitment, action. I need to do something of impact and transformation about this thing that is diversity and inclusion. Because I was participating in a lot of groups, events, and I needed that something more need to be done. So when I started Fin for She, the most important thing about the project was going through theory to practice it. How can we do action? How can we transform and help companies and people, all employees, to talk about diversity and inclusion in the way that they could apply and do this in their day to day? So Fin4She is a connecting platform for financial markets for women, brands, men. So I see that there are a lot of men here with us today. I really like when they are part of the events and discussions like this. And for everyone, company brands that seeks to connect with gender equality in an inspire way. So when I see inspire way is that we have the mission of inspiring and helping, and not say what is wrong and what you're not doing well. So we have the mission to inspiring, boosting business results through an effective actions, and part of the communities to see in every woman the opportunity to transform the entire market. So, since we have all these missions, what we do right now and what are our projects? So, we have curatorship and content. We have a product of education. So, what is the education? We develop some courses that help to improve women in their career. We are already launched 3 courses, and now we are doing a partnership here in Brazil with an academy, a local academy that is going to distribute our courses. We have 2 events, that is the Young Women Summit and the Women in Finance. And the Young Women Summit, this event, this concept and creation of this event was born last year because lots of companies in the financial markets were calling me saying, Carolina, I cannot hire women. I cannot hire girls because I do not get the CVs. I do not have women to interview. So when the companies started to talk about this with me, that the problem was the presence. In the other way, I started to research and see what is the market cap, where is the size, where were these women. And for my surprise, since I have already 800 women who subscribe for my event, and I started to receive a lot of messages and women interested in working in financial markets. So when I did this event, the purpose was connect women who wants to work in the financial markets, companies who wants to hire women for their companies and do something about the diversity and improve their diversity employees environment. So for my other surprise, since we launched this, we did a platform for women resumes, and we already have 2,000 women register in this platform that is now on a soft launch. We are still testing and see how can we do this, but companies who join Fin4She as a membership can work in this platform, can search in this platform. And something that is curious about, we have now 2,000 women in Brazil that wants to work in the financial markets, and 80% is searching for a job opportunity. And 20% is diversity of race. That is really interesting too. So I have the mission now to connect and to help all these 80% of these women to get their jobs and get their opportunities, and also help companies to improve their diversity employer environment. So we have a mission of connection, and now our core business is this platform, and how can we improve this platform and help all the system. And it is a challenge when you think now, I believe I am talking here and with most of the audience is from financial markets. And it's a challenge when you talk about something that is diversity, that is not tangible. So how can I talk about business when I'm talking about something that is diversity that is not tangible? We heard in the video just in the beginning of this event a lot of points, bullet points that is really important about the diversity and how can improve the outcomes, the business, the beauty of having different stories, different bias, sensibilities. So I was noting here a lot of things that she was saying that I found really important. But the thing is, we have to start to talk about diversity not as a cause, but as a competitive advantage. It's economic issue. When we are talking about ESG, we see a lot of companies worried about and how the world have approached banks, investors all over the world about this subject. We see a lot of them doing due diligence questionnaires with inquiries such how the company deal with gender inclusion among their employees, how many women participated in the decision committees. Companies have invested in projects that ensure the environment, social, and governance as ESG, that these issues are being addressed. But what we see yet is that environment, the E of the ESG, is the focus right now. Here in Brazil, I'm talking more specifically. I do not know a lot about the markets or in the other countries in Latin America, but we see that it is a way, and it is an important way, that we need to start to focus on the S too, and companies need to talk and to think about strategies and actions and how they're going to address this. So that's how we are going to help. And some numbers and some facts that why does it matter. For an example, 93% chance that companies with gender diversity will outperform their competitors in financial performance. And 19% more in revenue is generated by diversity management teams doing the ability of innovation. And this is something that is really important. It's not about men being better than women, or women is better than men, or we need a team with more women or men. It's the beauty of being together, of having these different stories, bias, sensibility. We have Carolina talking about the managing of a lot of money is, and the way that women deals with managing risk is totally different than the way that men's manage risks. So you have, when you have different diversity in the team, you probably will have a better managing risk on your portfolio, for an example. So the beauty and the better results, the outcomes, is not about having men or having women, but being together. And 24 months after hiring women CFO, companies generate 6% of increase in the profit and 80% on the stock prices. This is a S&P source of 2019. And another thing that I find really important is about the young. So people are companies are struggling thinking about this young generation and how can we be prepared to have these millennials, and we have to change. This is a fact. I do believe in that. And 83% of the millennials are more engaged when they believe that company have a work that is more inclusive, that is a more inclusive culture. So we do have an issue when we think that we need this young, and what can we do as a company, as leader, to attract this new generation and this millennium. And I'm thinking I have just a few minutes, so I will go really fast here. And something that we did, thinking on action and thinking on practice. So we launched a best practice booklet to help companies, and this is open for all markets, and we do have this best practice in English too. If you do have interest, I guess Barbara can share with you all. This material is public and is in your website. And we divided the women career in 3 pillars: attraction, retention, and ascension, and how companies and leaders and also employees can help and talk about diversity, action, and commitment, and improving these 3 pillars in the women career. For an example, when we talk about attraction, the first pillar we look at is attraction. Here in Brazil, we are talking about 57%, almost 60% of girls are the university numbers. So we are the majority in university. But when we are talking in CEOs in Brazil, we are talking about 2%. So it's a huge lack that happens in the cycle, that almost 60% are university, are girls, and 2% came in the position of CEOs. So what happened in the cycle that we do not go forward? So what can we do for the attraction? For an example, I will go really quickly here, so do not take a lot of your time, but we say have at least 30% of women's resumes to start an interview for any position you have in your company. Using a clear and transparent in communication with the job description without male adjectives, and do a very good campaign to have women on board to interview these positions. What we see sometimes, it seems really simple, but sometimes when we look at in our environment, men are interviewing for the jobs, for the positions, and sometimes women in the same position are not asked to participate, to join, only the HR team. So it's just a little details that we can do, and you can change the whole process and have more women on board. And for an example, in retention, that is the second pillar, because it's related to women who have already been hired but find difficult to stay. We think this retention is really important because it's when women started to leave their careers, leave their jobs, or thinking about a career transition. Sometimes, in the most of times, I believe, we address this to maternity, like, oh, she wants to take care of their child, or she wants something different for their life. But when I started to do some research and think about it, this subject, and talk with a lot of women in the markets, the principle, the reason that is crucial for women in this case is because they do not find it well paid, less challenge, and they want new positions, and they started to be less promoted than men. Is in the retention that the payment, the gender gap of payment is started to be more, it started to be huge. It's not in the beginning of the career. I do agree that maternity is the most important issue for these gaps. Like when you think about the bonus, women have some lacks when they go in the maternity leave, for an example. So one thing that I think is the most important here is having a career path for women differently in the middle management level. How can we look in these women and secure that you're gonna have all the way being paid well, having been with challenges and promotion. So it's really important to take care here of the career mentoring programs among all employees, including mixing mentors as he for she for he. Something really interesting that I heard last week was a CEO here in Brazil that is 50 plus, and she told in an interview that she chose a girl from 28 years old to mentor her. She would like to learn what a mind of 30s think and would recommend for her. So the mentoring is really important to hear all the way. It's not only the people who are higher than you or in the same gender than you. And ascension, to end here, is the third pillar, and when we discussed evolution, and if we don't work really well the attraction and the retention, we would not have women to ascend. So it's really important this to be in the strategic of the company, leaders ready to monitor gender equality in the promotions and assign each member of the board to have women with high potential to promote and mentoring. This must be in the company's strategic plan. And I think I'm over time here, so I will just say that not everything is a checklist or a booklet for best practice. And I do believe that we need to take some responsibility as employees, as human beings, as women also, because we are the extension of the companies. Companies are made by us, and we need to take some responsibility and see what we can do every single day about the subject to impact, to transform, and to promote a better environment and to everyone around us. We need more women acting like a woman, and this does not apply only to CEOs or women leaders. This is something to everyone. We need all women thinking about this. This journey begins on us, in everyone. We need to take responsibility about this. And I choose a phrase that I like a lot. Kamala Harris, that was the first vice president elected in the United States. She says that I am here today because of all women before me. And we do have responsibility to all the women that are coming after us too. So I will leave this message that we need to do more. We need to do every little small things every day and thinking about the ways, the path that we want to leave to the people, to the girls, to everyone who's coming after us. We have this mission is ours, is yours, is from everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Carolina, for this very inspiring story and how your own story and how you face the challenges we women face made you help other women progress through her career. Thank you also for all the figures you shared and concrete figures showing the importance of diversity. And we are running a little bit behind of time, so I'm going directly to introduce Audrey Tuckwell Henry. Audrey is president and CEO of Scotia Group in Jamaica. She has a combined 34 years of experience in banking, with 19 years at the executive level and a proven track record of leadership within the financial services industry. Audrey is mother of 3 grown-up children. Audrey, thank you very much for being here with us. It's all yours.
Thank you, Barbara. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're hearing me well.
Yes.
First of all, let me just say what a pleasure it is to be here to share and to listen to the inspiring stories of the other women on the panel. Also, one CFA Society for Jamaica for the work that they've been doing here to promote and build the professionals in the financial industry. I also want to comment on the bit of research that was shared with us, and just to say that it's compelling, and we expect that this will set the course for change. I want to start quickly by highlighting a study by McKinsey, which indicates that companies, and Carolina mentioned that as well, with greater diversity in leadership tend to have higher profits and longer term value. And it is study of why diversity matters, that it is noted that companies in the top quartile executives were 15% more likely to generate above average profitability. So some of these studies indicate that this matter of diversity and inclusion is a business imperative. It is something that we should not overlook, and it is something that if we deprioritize, it in fact has a negative impact on the outlook for large and small companies. One of the perspectives that I want to bring to bear, both perspectives, is really the Caribbean perspective on this matter of gender diversity in finance, as well as my own perspective. I was recently appointed, I'm like 2 months, and I'm CEO, as you indicated, Barbara, for a company, Scotia Group Jamaica, that has been in Jamaica for 100 years. And I just happen to be the second female head over a 130-year period. So change is coming. And I think that that's very, very good to see the shift. I'm also happy to say that in Jamaica, of the banks, the financial groups, at least half of us are women. And this is particularly instructive because even a decade ago, that was not the case. So some shift that's happening. But I'll talk a little bit later about the fact that we need to see that level of shift side of the financial sector, because we're not quite. One other thing I would like to point out is the fact that even on our board, more than half of the members of our board of directors are female at Scotia Group. So it's interesting. One of the things that we noted was that even though we were seeing females in management level, we weren't seeing them at the board level. But the truth still just, it's not necessarily representative in Jamaica that you have such a diverse board of directors. The bank is very, very committed to diversity and inclusion. We do have that as a key agenda and one of the key changes that we want to see in our organizations globally. And so that has been taken note of at the highest level in the organization. And we have very diversity and inclusion programs with a focus as well on gender diversity. But that even though I'm a female CEO, we have this good track record in Jamaica for females at the leadership level. It depends on where I am. I could still be, as Carolina mentioned, the only woman in a room, and depends on where I am and where the meeting is. I certainly can be the only Black woman on the call or in the meetings on a number of occasions. So in my personal experience, I do have two situations. I'm not only female, but I am Black. And so we know, as Margaret mentioned, that we do have key issues with racism, and Black persons, Black women and men are not necessarily in the C-suite. But you know, I was never daunted by that statistic. I've just continued to work and to do my best and to also open doors for other women other Black women from humble beginnings like myself, to be able to move forward. I'm also the proud mother of two females. I have two daughters, young professionals who are also charting their course. So I think we as women who have made our way really have that obligation, that responsibility to send the elevator back down and to help the chart women come in making their place at the points of decision within the financial industry. One of the key things that we noticed, and quite a bit of statistics about women, and we see that also in Jamaica, where a number of women are in university pursuing finance or business studies. 2014, from 2014 going forward, we're seeing about 70% of women graduating from faculty of social sciences and pursuing business qualifications and degrees. But what we see is that our particular issue level, but not the number of women who rise to the C-suite is very small. And one indication that there's still work to be done, particularly in the investment side of our industry. Jamaica, for example, more specifically, we see where in 10 of the larger investment houses, there's only one woman heading that one such institution. So we're still seeing a preference from men to investment, and that continues to be a. So what I would say is that for the Caribbean, our issue is not so much, and for Jamaica, women having management roles. But what we're seeing is that the women tend to be stuck in that low to middle management level. And so as you rise to the representation in the C-suite, that number gets significantly less. And invariably, you know, women are doing the hard work, but their direct reports at the leadership level and the C-suite level are invariably men. So I think there's still a lot of work that we need to do. I think that there's still work that as businesses and government that we have to do to promote gender equity. It is not just something that is nice to have. It's not something that is nice to consider. It is important. And in Jamaica in particular, we find a number of women heading households. Unfortunately, we have a number of single parent households, and in those cases, it's largely women. So there is the burden of a woman wanting to be able to provide for their children. But one of the compelling statistics that we have seen is that even though Jamaica on women in leadership, we rank very low on equity in compensation. When the study was done of 140, we were 65th in terms of women in management, but 92 the pay, equal pay for equal work. And that is particularly concerning given that we have had laws in this country in 70 or to support equal pay for women. That also as an area that we need to focus on. And we all know that journey is something that companies have there to address. Governments have a responsibility to enforce laws in terms of equal pay for women because it exists. I know we're out of time, so I will wrap up and just make a few points about what I believe can be done to ensure that we have better representation of women in finance and better representation of women in the C-suite in particular. So there are three things that I think we can focus on. The first one, we need to collect data and share this data around the representation of women as we go up the ladder, up into that C-suite. Is very compelling and can be a real eye-opener, as we look at this issue. The second thing is that I believe that companies, and this is something that I'm very proud to say that Scotiabank is very well known for, that we should really create an environment of coaching, training, mentoring, and capacity to foster the development of women to step into more senior leadership. And there's one element that I think is that matter of sponsorship. So mentorship is really sharing perspectives and views and supporting, but sponsorship is when senior people use their voice to identify, elevate, celebrate in the right circles about the contribution of who would. One thing I know that as women, we are very guilty of. If there's an opportunity for a job, we're trying to tick all the boxes before we put our names forward or before we put ourselves forward. Whereas the men, if they have one or two of the criteria, will put themselves up. So the matter of sponsorship is an important component to elevate women. And so that the work, the successes of women is elevated in the right circles. Because invariably, sometimes as women, we're not even at home taking care of the children, taking care of the household. And so we're not networking. We're not in the spaces outside of the workplace where decisions are being made and where discussions are happening. So I think it is important that the concept of mentorship and sponsorship is seen as a key way of elevating women in the area of finance. And finally, I would strongly recommend that organizations seek to have policy documentation, policy programs that is focused on gender equity. And for organizations where there is a diverse mix of race, to ensure that also elevated in those programs, and that their committees focus with the responsibility to change that needs to happen. Women have been blazing trails, doing the heavy lifting, doing the hard work, being at the bottom of the ladder, even though we have the skills, the capabilities, and the competencies to be at the table, being decision makers and driving decisions. But yet, representation in the boardroom and in the C-suite continues to be way below the representation and lower tiers of management. So I think my charge governments and businesses to create an environment that is very focused on for better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Audrey, for another so engaging and inspiring speech. And you have never been daunted by the fact that you are truly a minority, gender, race. And I have comments here in the chat saying how wonderful it is to see such a minority coming from the Caribbean, because we have three very big countries, being Brazil, Chile, and Mexico, and somebody so and so good to see. We need change to happen, and that change is coming in Jamaica. We are in a very region where diversity falls much behind than in other places. So thank you very much also for these concrete steps. Before I introduce our last speaker, what I have been discussing offline with Melvin, given time constraints, and also you have been so clear, I will sum up and not take questions, because many of the questions have also been withdrawn. But I will leave for 2 minutes for each panelist to do closing words or additional comments if you want. So now I'll introduce Noor, and then I will do a closing remarks and give you maybe a couple of minutes, each one who wants. So our next and final panelist is Noor Cristiani. Noor is JP Morgan's Mexico equity strategist. She has been with the firm for 10 years and has been ranked among the top 3 Mexico strategy in institutional investor for all of them. Prior to JP Morgan, Noor has worked with Credit Suisse and BBVA. Noor is a CFA charter holder and is actively engaged in JP Morgan's effort for promoting female advancement in the financial industry. Noor is mother of a 5-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy. Noor, thank you very much for being here with us. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, Barbara, and thank you everyone at the CFA Institute for having us. It's definitely a pleasure to be sharing the panel here with such accomplished, powerful, and strong women. Listening to all of your stories, there are some perks to being the last one coming in, and it's been listening to you guys, and it's actually quite amazing and inspiring to listen to your stories, where you've come from, what you've accomplished. And the common thread that I can find across the 3 of you is strength and inspiration. I think that in the path for building a better world for our children, I think that the 3 of us also share motherhood as a common thread, and I don't think that you will let me lie when I say that having children takes you that step forward into what you want to accomplish. And I don't criticize under any circumstance people who decide to take a different path and who choose to stay at home with their kids. And I think that everyone has their mindset into what they want to achieve, into the example that they want to set and what they want to teach their children. And I relate to you 3 in the sense that I want to help build a better world for my kids. So as Barbara mentioned, I have a 3-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl who wants to work at JP Morgan. Actually, she sits on my desk, she looks at my screen, and she sees all the greens and the reds, the way that she calls them. And she says, "It was a good day, mommy, because we had a lot of greens," or "It was a bad day, mommy, because we had a lot of reds," the Bloomberg screen, right? And so that's quite inspiring that she's growing up with an example of working is just natural. So you have, I mean, it's not that you have to work, and eventually she'll come to choose, and hopefully she'll have the choice on what she wants to do with her life and the path that she wants to take. But at least I want her to have that choice. And I want my boy also to respect the choice for whomever sits next to him, whether it's wife, partner, colleague. I don't know what his life is going to shape up to be, what his choices are going to be, but what I do want for him is for him to respect the right for everyone else who's not born with the advantages that he's born with, to grow as much as he hopefully will in this world. So that's definitely my inspiration. My story, I won't go deep into it, because I think that the main objective of those listening to us is probably just learning about how to move forward in a male-dominated world, and that's certainly something that the 4 of us share in common. I also started very, very young. I was the youngest CFA charter holder in Mexico, female charter holder in Mexico. Way back when, of course, this was a long time ago, thankfully. And now we have a lot more women charter holders in the country. I myself, as much as all of you guys, found to be the only woman in the table, the only woman across my teams. When I came into meetings, for example, and I was portfolio manager several years before my tenure as a research analyst at JP Morgan, I used to come into the room listening or into a research analyst meeting, and people came to find out or thought that I was the analyst or the secretary, for example. I had that so many times. Or there were others already at my current job in JP Morgan, in which I came into the room And of course, as you can see, my name is not very common. It's not very common in Mexico. It's not very common on this side of the world. My family, my mom was Lebanese. So many times I came into a meeting and people were like, oh, you're the salesperson who's accompanying Mr. Nur Cristiani. I'm like, no, I'm Miss Nur Cristiani. And so the fact that I had to open up doors for myself, showing people that despite my age, and back then, right, I'm not that young anymore, but eventually at some point I was, despite my age and despite my gender, I was well equipped to be sat down at the table with them and being able to have a discussion. So the one thing that I would recommend for maybe young leaders listening to us now is, you know, grab the bull by the horns. Don't be afraid. The worst thing that can happen is that you get a no answer. Otherwise, the road is completely open for what you want to achieve. So be brave. Don't be scared. Carolina, listening to you when you mentioned, Mary, when you mentioned that there was a position and that you raised your hand and you asked for it. I think that's one of the things that we women lack. Sometimes we just put our head down and we just want to work and do things the right way. And, you know, we want to show that our work is worth a promotion. But sometimes you actually have to raise your voice. So do raise your voice. Do take a step forward. Do ask for that promotion. Do complain. If there's something that you don't like, do raise your voice. So that's my second piece of advice. And then I have the honor also of working at an institution that is deeply committed to diversity and inclusion. JP Morgan runs programs across the board for Black leadership, Hispanic heritage, Asian communities, veteran leadership as well, or re-entry into the workforce across the board. I mean, of course, women is a very important part of our diversity and inclusion programs. So it's quite an ample community of like-minded people. We are striving to make a change. We're striving to make a change in every single aspect of what JP Morgan does. And I am sure that across every single level, across every single line of business, we all put our grain of salt. On our research team a couple of weeks ago, we put out a report on women on boards in Mexico as well, trying to at least raise awareness of the fact that this is something that companies need to address. A lot has been said about that, and few of you already mentioned the lack of representation, the wage gap that many women find during their professional careers. But sometimes, at least on financial markets, and at least when it comes to talking to companies, to talking to investors, some of these things do go unnoticed. So having somebody at a place like JP Morgan raise the voice and say, you know what, this is wrong, we need to address this, and not only for an ethical perspective, but also from an investment perspective. There's over $7 trillion being shifted from baby boomers and into millennials and Gen Zs. These people, as Carolina was mentioning, they do care about these issues. They do care about the type of policies that their possible employers are caring for, right? You come into an interview, and years ago when I was interviewing for jobs, I didn't even think about asking what were the diversity and inclusion programs that each of the firms that I was interviewing for was running with, right? And this time around, every single time that I interview an analyst, one of the first things that they ask is, what are the efforts that you're doing for building more inclusive teams? And it's totally fair to think about that, because we are an inclusive and we are a diverse population everywhere that we go. And so with that mindset, I think that it is important for investors, for companies across the world to realize that if they want to profit, let alone, as I was saying, let alone the ethical responsibility, if they want to profit from the 7 trillion, they need to start thinking along the same lines of what their investor target base will eventually be. And so caring about these issues is caring about your profitability. We found that in Mexico, at least, if companies were able to bring up the levels of inclusion for women to the levels that we see across the US, for example, or across the rest of Latin America, we might have an increase of nearly 700 basis points in profitability for companies. That is massive. And it's low-hanging fruit, right? I think that the work that Carolina Cavenaghi is doing is it's quite valuable in the sense of educating people and connecting the employers with the human resources as well, because that's a complaint that I also get a lot of the times, right? That there's no women that are sufficiently prepared to take on these steps. That's not true. You just have to open the door. You just have to open the door to that young lady who might look like a salesperson, who might look like a secretary with the weird, strange name that you've never heard, and maybe listen to what she has to say. But then again, you have to raise your voice for that. I have been working with JP Morgan for the past 10 years, and I have seen an immense amount of development and improvement in terms of the awareness, but there's definitely a lot of things to be done still. My inspiration comes from my kids. As I was mentioning, what I want to do is I want to leave a better world for both of them. I want to help my boy build a better world for the women and the rest of the diverse people around him. And I want my girl to be able to have the choices that I didn't have. And of course, that I am thankful for those choices because my mom didn't have those. So every step forward counts. I mean, honestly, I know that we have 15 minutes each. I don't want to bore you with, details about my story, especially after listening to such towering women as the ones that we've heard so far this morning. But I want to leave you, everyone, with these two pieces of advice: be brave and raise your voice. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Noor, and what a challenge to give your speech after all the three first ones, and you managed to introduce new concepts. Amazing, the story that they said, okay, you're coming with Mr. Noor Cristiani, right? And no, this is me. And your mention about the children, when studies from CFA Institute show that the #1 reason we do not move on or we not pursue more career is because we take care of our children, right? And if we could have some more support, it would be easier. And the importance of having a role model, it is shown that women like your daughter who have a mother, a role mother that is in STEM is much more likely to pursue one of those careers, and importance to raise your hand and ask for it. And so I will give a very, very brief closing remarks and then open it to any of you, maybe first Carolina Mery, then Carolina Cavenaghi, then Audrey, and then Noor, if you would like to say some more things. And thanks again for those inspiring stories from such accomplished professionals. As Noor said, the importance of role models. You made it to the top. You are an example, and you're making change happen only by your stories and by the women you are empowering through mentoring and through showing that you did it. And if I can give a common ground on everything you said, your strength, how you inspire us, how capable you are, that you never stop to learn. Your purpose, as Carolina Mery said, my daughter says, what my mother does is helping old people to be able to have food and medicine. This is the purpose, the final purpose, right? And Carolina Cavenaghi is directly helping women move on. So we should never forget about the purpose. So thank you for all you do. Thank you for your commitment to action. Thank you for empowering, educating, and I hope all our companies, governments, and we all step up to make this a better world. So not sure if you would like to say some closing remarks.
I'm just say thank you for participating here and to listen, and thank you for the opportunity to listen all this history or point of view. Very, very interesting, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Carolina.
Thank you so much. It was a very inspiring morning. It was a pleasure to get to know all the stories. Carolina, Audrey, and Cristiani was amazing. Barbara, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and we can go together, be brave, take a seat at the table, and don't leave before you leave. So all the things I wanna just leave here for everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolina.
I too want to just say a big thank you for the opportunity. I think the conversation is timely. You know, we all hope in 10 years we won't need to have this conversation again. And I am very optimistic that we're getting there. We're seeing, and with institutions like the CFA Institute really pushing and moving the needle, we expect that. So thank you so much for the opportunity. Blessings.
Thank you, Audrey.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the forum. Thanks for the time. Thanks to all of those who connected to our talk, and hopefully you'll be able to take along with you something that is valuable for your career going forward. And do not shy away from the challenges. On the opposite, take them heads on, because that's what's going to make you grow.
Thank you very much, Noor. And Melvin, now it's back to you.
Thank you very much, Barbara, and thank you very much to all of our panelists. This has been very inspiring. And of course, we at the CFA Institute in the region, we are committed to help the transformation and to not only create impact in our societies and economies, but also help the development of one of our most important resources, which is our demographics. And half or more of Latin America, over 900 million people, are women. So if women have the same rights and the same participation as men, for sure the GDP could grow at least 1 or 2% more. So this is a long-term commitment for the Institute and for everybody that works at the different societies, the 13 societies that are now in the Advocacy Council on the region. Thank you very much again, Barbara, for your good moderations. Now I will introduce Sarah Maynard. Sarah Maynard is the Global Head External Inclusion and Diversity Strategies and Programs at the CFA Institute. She has a long track record in the financial sector and investment sector. So please, Sarah, go ahead. Are you there? Okay.
I am indeed. Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. So we can have some slides to look at. Okay, so there we go. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, it is okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, I'm really very delighted to be with you today. I'm very grateful for the invitation, and it's a true honor to present after such an amazing panel of women leaders. So thank you so much. I also really value the fact that this is a collaborative venture, that all these societies and individuals are working together. And that's a very powerful piece of the conversation, I think. The presentation that I'm going to share with you today owes quite a lot to two particular colleagues of mine. One is my internal opposite number, Kelly Palmer, who leads our internal inclusion and diversity. And the other is Rebecca Fender, who leads Future of Finance research. So you'll see certainly some contributions from them as I work through these slides. And a lot of them will pick up on points that other speakers have already made. So I think we can find all sorts of very interesting ways of reinforcing these important messages. The other place that I want to start is to emphasize that although we're certainly talking about gender diversity today, one of the big changes we're making at CFA Institute, and Marg indicated in her opening video, is that we really want to move the conversation a lot wider, so that we're not only going to be talking about gender diversity, but diversity in its very widest sense, and particularly on race, which is something that historically CFA Institute hasn't really done. So that's a change that we're really driving forward, and we're very keen to see happen in the industry at large. The other thing I would mention is that, as Melvin has just indicated in referring to my job title, we have inclusion before diversity, and that's really because inclusion is the action piece. that diversity is important in terms of defining who people are. It's very much about identities and differences and perspectives. But inclusion is the action piece. It's what we can all do as individuals, as firms, as members of our societies to further change. So that's just, I hope will frame the way I approach this important work. So if we think about the context, the wider context for the industry and the point at which we all find ourselves, clearly there are some very major challenges and changes, and those were afoot before the pandemic started, as Melvin mentioned at the beginning of the session today. So we know that investment firms are facing fee compression, that there is a real demand to adapt and incorporate technology, and that essentially there's a lot that we can do to improve efficiency and decision making. So essentially what that comes to is that perhaps old ways in the industry won't work in the way that they have, and that there's a real urgency to adapt, because otherwise there is a risk that disruptors come in and actually firms will end up in a much weaker place. So this is an opportunity, it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity. And then, of course, if we think about sort of maybe some 101s of investing, then of course we know that diversification in terms of portfolios is pretty key. I don't think that's a contentious piece. However, when it comes to looking at teams, that's where there is perhaps some a sort of failure to apply those key investment precepts. So we tend all too often to think about individuals who fit into a team, which is perhaps a strange way of thinking when, say, you look at it as a diversification. So frequently, cultural fit is the emphasis that hiring managers will place on their approach to recruiting new people or promoting those they already have. So what we would emphasize is the importance of cultural add. You really want to be getting people in who are different. And then when you start to think about how you might approach your investment techniques, then you know that beating the market means thinking differently. And it's very difficult to do that if you have a very homogeneous team. So different backgrounds, perspectives help facilitate that. And so what we really want to be thinking about is the way in which we can really harness the opportunity that increasing gender representation and inclusion in the industry really gives the industry. So I've mentioned the benefits initially of gender diversity, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail. We've also, and the panelists have already mentioned some of this, the wider stakeholder pressures for diversity, whether it's government or regulatory or clients, or consistency with ESG investment strategies. And we also know that to improve the quality of thinking and that collective intelligence piece, there's a lot that we can do with much more varied and diverse teams and inclusive working environments. And then this is just going to give you a snapshot. We've looked across our societies, and essentially we've looked at global women workforce participation rates versus the percentage of CFA Institute members. So we're somewhat taking CFA Institute members as a proxy for the industry at large. But essentially you can really see that it's very far in the main from where it needs to be. And then also, as again, some of the panelists have really drawn out, Audrey's comments are perhaps I particularly highlight about the unusualness of seeing women leaders at the top of the investment industry. And that these are our global figures. So no surprise to this audience and to the panelists. But I think always worth emphasizing, we have a lot of room for growth here. There is a tremendous opportunity to pull those numbers up. And particularly if we think about the pipeline, we can see that we need to essentially have more women coming into the industry so that they're getting into a state of readiness to take those senior positions over time. Now, we also have to, I think in thinking about the business case, think about investment performance. And it's great to have some women investors in this panel today, because what we know when we look at the data is that actually, essentially women perform well across fund types over time. And essentially the evidence really bears out that women do well, and particularly well in periods of market volatility, which is the Goldman Sachs research that I would pick out. some of my colleagues on the panel have already pointed out research from McKinsey, and all of that, it really reinforces the points that essentially having women-led funds, women on teams, is actually going to produce better results. We see the same when we look at the performance of women-owned funds, and this Knight research from 2019 really shows that proportionately women are well represented in the top quartile for performance. And then if we think about the performance of women on boards, and there I would highlight the Credit Suisse research, which has had a reasonably long duration. And we know that essentially where you have women on boards, that typically you have less groupthink, you have a higher return on equity, as again colleagues have shown, but also that essentially the bad stuff is avoided. You have less fraud, regulatory violations, and essentially you have a difference in behavior that's driven by having a more diverse board. And as I've been indicated at the outset, we're very conscious of the factors that are driving industry change. And one of the kind of pieces that has framed a lot of the conversation in UK and Europe, and then gradually this has spread globally, has been the 30% club. And I think that's sort of quite an interesting point to look at, because what it's really highlighting is that tipping point that occurs when women start to form a larger group within a board, within a committee, or indeed for that matter on a team. And what I think is striking is that if you only have that one and done appointment, so one woman, okay, then that's that box ticked, you're not going to see any impact. If you have two, then women really just a subgroup and don't get recognized for their professional expertise. Once you get to 30%, once you get to a bigger group, then essentially they start to be recognized as, say, for their professional expertise, they can really have an impact. And I would highlight a story from my last role, which was the head of stewardship with an equities boutique. And I was talking to the chairman of a global energy company. And he said that he was initially quite a skeptic on the diversity piece. He was very distinctly coming from, how should I say, a very traditional mindset. But he said when women got to 45% on the board that he was chairing, he really became a convert, because he could see the radical difference in the quality of the decision making that this board was having. So somebody moved from being a skeptic to being a convert, and is now really very much a male ally. And then if we also think about sort of regulatory kinds of pressures that the industry needs to think about, in the UK, the Treasury's Women in Finance Charter has been quite influential. And it's one of those interesting things where a previous government set it up, in fact, with a woman prime minister, but actually it's grown and got a life of its own. So the UK government put it on hold during the COVID pandemic and said companies were freed from the obligation to report. But actually a majority of companies continued to report even though they didn't have to. So they've now recognized the value of this external accountability. The other kinds of trends that we're seeing, I would highlight the Nasdaq proposal. So essentially new rules that would require companies, quoted companies, to either comply or explain as to why they weren't meeting certain diversity requirements on their boards. And in Japan, where historically gender diversity has been very low, the upcoming revisions to the corporate governance code are likely to include requirements for data disclosure around women in leadership. So essentially we can see some major forces for change. And then of course, as again, my colleagues on the panel have mentioned, that the force of millennial expectations are really considerable, whether you think of that in terms of the transition of wealth, as Nuala has indicated, from baby boomers to millennials, or indeed millennials as a force in the workplace, where in order to be recruited, essentially they are looking to see certain measures of inclusion and diversity in the workplaces they join. So we're really looking at some quite significant changes that the industry is in the midst of. And these are, as I say, very much opportunities for us to think differently. One piece of that is a greater understanding of why it matters. so that there's been some great research around the business of diverse teams simply doing better at complex problem solving. So that collective intelligence factor that you get when you have groups of people together. And I think that what's really very striking is in an industry that really is absolutely a knowledge business, we are hugely selective in terms of intelligence and the expectations we have for those who come into the industry. But by not having diverse teams, we're really missing out on a huge way to leverage group intelligence. So essentially what we're showing here is the research which indicates that essentially teams do better when you can have equal levels of discussion, equal levels of input into discussion, and that sort of social sensitivity is really important, and that speaks to a wider skill set than maybe just data analysis. It's also social interaction becomes really important. There's some research as well from Cornell University, which essentially shows that a higher proportion of women on a team is positively correlated with collective intelligence. And again, this is something that's much more widely understood. So we've already touched on the way in which clients are really demanding, what they want information about the group who is managing their money, and B, they have an expectation that essentially diverse teams are going to do better in managing their money. So to the point about money being managed in order for people to have better choices later in life, that savings and pensions piece, it's really interesting to think the way in which that's starting to become built into decision making. So essentially, firms are going to be held to account by the end client. And so we see that in our survey of our members that we did, this is just over a year ago, and essentially across all groups, this is the overwhelming message. The only possible exception is in the 55 plus age group, which makes that transition that Noah mentioned from baby boomers to millennials in terms of wealth being passed through generations. That becomes a really important point. And then just again, highlighting the research that we think is really at the heart of why the business case is so important. Essentially, what I'd highlight here is that business that when you have a diverse group of individuals on a team, we know that the internal challenge, the checks and balances that emerge, means that diversity helps to reduce errors. And again, highlighting the fact that we are in an industry which is doing complex analysis and decision making. So we essentially can see the way in which diversity reduces the impact of error. And then the other piece I would highlight here is that the CFA has a real value for women in the industry who want to be able to demonstrate, they want to get their CV across someone's desk, they want to get that opportunity for interview. And what we've seen in our survey of our members, but most of all from women members, is that the CFA has really made a difference to putting down, if you like, those biases that commonly exist. So for those who still think that perhaps women are less good at maths or less good at analysis, then achieving the CFA, really shows that actually that this is simply not true. And while we might know that to be true, we are still having to deal with those sort of biases that can affect hiring decisions. And then the other piece I would really highlight is women. They are the biggest emerging market. So you ignore the impact of gender acquiring wealth, women acquiring wealth and making somewhat different decisions to the way male-controlled wealth has historically been allocated is a particularly critical piece. And that links up very much with, again, what Melvin said in his opening remarks about ESG. That's a really powerful piece, because if individuals are looking to invest their values, then they say they want to see that the investment firms that they're entrusting their wealth to are really able to reflect those. And that's at every level, whether it's in terms of the composition of firms or indeed investment choices, and even in the extent to which, as investors, we are driving listed companies or even private companies to change their own diversity. So using influence at every step in the investment chain. So that's the wider piece and that wider context. So what's CFA Institute doing in order to really further inclusion? So I think one of the pieces I'm going to go on to talk about is the research that we're doing, because we continue to really test what it is that's going to achieve change, and particularly in our industry. We're also using our influence and convening capacity to essentially to create some infrastructure to further inclusion in a way that individual firms can't do. And to that end, we've created an inclusion code, which we'll be launching in the next few months, and I will talk about that in a moment. And we are also building demographic data of our membership so that we know who's in the industry and, even more importantly, who isn't, as Audrey touched on. So those are sort of some key components. So let me just give you a little bit more insight into what those look like. So Experimental Partner Program was launched very much in sort of the old normal, so well before COVID. It were underway in 2019, early 2019. And what we've gathered is the data from 42 firms who have signed up to drive inclusion within their businesses. They chose up to 3 ideas from a suite of 20, and these ideas can be found in the Driving Change report, which is on our Institute website. The firms' names are listed there. And as you can see, we've had these extensive calls. Essentially, every quarter we checked in with these firms. We had a conversation for 30 minutes, and we captured in minutes and in the data that they shared what they were doing. So we really listened to what was working and what wasn't working. And we had quite a sort of detailed and probing questions of detailed conversation about what was happening. And just to give you an idea of the kinds of ideas, majority of these firms were choosing foundational concepts, and that makes sense because the investment industry as a whole is somewhat behind other industries globally. If we think about the way medicine is run, or even law, there are a whole range of other sort of knowledge-based industries where inclusion is further advanced than it is in investment. So unsurprisingly, as I say, there's been a focus on foundational concepts, but then as you can see from the other areas, and as you might expect for the CFA-led industry, you can see that measurement and accountability is a critical piece, but also communication, because how something lands within a firm is the framing and the kinds of conversations you're having, and the way in which information flows top to bottom and bottom to top is pretty critical in terms of driving change. And one of the things that we looked at when we were assessing how these firms were doing and reviewing, we're now at the stage where we're actually reviewing the data because the first phase of the program has finished. We really found some structures to think about whether firms were more or less mature in terms of where they got to with this inclusion work. So typically in the early stage, we'd see that firms, and as you can see, they were very much the majority. They got a degree of leadership buy-in, but it wasn't well established. They hadn't really gathered their employee resource groups. So those groups, typically normally of underrepresented individuals who were both supporting each other and sharing information with leadership, and equally providing a sort of think tank to explore ideas and initiatives that the firm might be proposing. So those kinds of processes were typically not well established in the early stage. So the work that firms were doing in that early stage was to set up the governance. As they moved into a more moderate sort of mid-stage, if you like, then you could start to see greater engagement and involvement. You would see that those employee resource groups are having an influence, and that there has been a degree of training across most employees. And the uniformity there becomes quite important. At the most mature, so the firms that were really sort of out in front, if you like, they had very visible and audible CEO support. They had their governance in place. They were already able to point to successes, and more importantly, they had metrics for those success established. And I think one, again, as you'd expect, a critical piece of the data analytics is that they had chosen to collect data which were aligned very closely with their business strategy. So instead of inclusion being, as Audrey mentioned, that nice to have, it's a need to have, because it's fully integrated into the strategic purpose of the business. And also, I think they were able to show that through their regular employee surveys and other forms of data, that the work that they were doing was understood by individuals. So essentially, you had a triangulation of data, multiple data points, which could also show not only indicate the diversity within the firm, but also the degree of inclusion. So the extent to which employees felt able to be fully involved in their work, not to be held back by biases, but to be fully recognized and integrated and able to give of their best. And then summarizing what we've seen so far, because the period that we've been in has been, it's called Experimental Partner Program. It's been experimental in a way that we couldn't have envisaged at the outset because of the COVID transition and all that effect of moving people from working from home, the impact in terms of caring responsibilities. That adjustment has been huge, and it's been right at the heart, if you like, of inclusion, because some firms have been able to make sure that they're really fully supportive of colleagues for whom this time has been harder. And that could be because they're junior and they don't have an adequate workspace, or it could be because they have caring responsibilities. And what we've seen is that the firms with greater maturity have been able to actually take the transition to virtual, and instead of essentially replicating the office agenda with a focus on presenteeism in a virtual space, they've focused on productivity. So they've seen that if employees are able to govern the time that they work, then they will still be very productive. But if they're being held to impossible deadlines and guidelines, and while having, as I say, all these additional responsibilities, then there is a risk that particularly women will drop out of the workforce, and that's a great loss on both sides. So essentially, those firms that have built up inclusion were able to have greater trust, both in their employees and their employees in the leadership. They had greater resilience because of that trust, and they had created a capacity to adapt, by which I mean that they had got used to, in doing this inclusion work, they'd got used to the business of essentially discussing programs that didn't work, how they needed to be adapted and changed. And that openness to discuss, frankly, failure is actually a huge benefit. It gives firms an agility and flexibility that is, it can be all too rare. So what we saw is that the more inclusive firms essentially have fared better through the COVID crisis, and would seem at this point to be making their plans to move to whether it's a hybrid or a gradual return to in-person in the office, and they're better placed to make those adaptations. I mentioned earlier that we have been working on an inclusion code, and this is very much leaning on the research that we've seen from the Experimental Partner Program. So it's specific to our industry. And so we have implementation guidance supporting essentially 6 principles. It's a little bit like the PRI. So we have 4 principles that cover the investment professional career life cycle, from the pipeline through to senior leadership. And then we have 1 principle, which is really about the power that asset owners, consultants, asset allocators have, the power of the purse, if you like, to really drive inclusion by demanding and looking for it. And I could point to one large US pension fund, which is essentially now asking for some very 200 lines of data on diversity for its asset managers. So there are those kinds of extraordinarily detailed and quite demanding rigors that are coming into the industry, really due to the end client demand as well. So at every point in that, again, in that value chain. The 6th principle is measurement. So it speaks to, say, that reporting that some pension funds and others are now asking for. So essentially, we're going to be looking for signatories to commit to A, acknowledge what their baseline is, and B, to commit to progress from that baseline to drive inclusion in the industry, which essentially is something that we believe will benefit their business, will benefit their end clients, and also with CFA Institute's mission in mind, have an eye to that wider societal good that we believe is so critical to the work that we do. So the code is something that will be coming out. It's North American based initially, but it's going to be regionally adapted. And that's an important piece where we will be working with societies to make those regional adaptations. So to conclude, I would say the business case for more women, for more diversity, for inclusion is really strong. The research will also always continue, but our focus is very much on action. That's what we're looking to see now. And there are ways in which everyone can make a difference individually and collectively. And I'm super inspired by what I've heard from our panelists today. I don't know whether we have time for any questions, maybe not, but I'm happy to take those by email. And really enjoyed hearing from other folks on the session today and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for your very interesting presentation. And our demographics in our region is very young, which is an advantage in a global economic competition marketplace. But young people also makes big differences and revolution changes, And so I really believe that our region, Latam and the Caribbean, have this advantage. Young people, young women could make the difference. So in the CFA Institute and in different societies, we are pledged to all your comments, and we of course salute this inclusion code, which is very important for every institution. And if Latin America and Caribbean could be one of the leading adopting these standards, we believe that young professionals and young women especially could make a difference faster than in other regions. Thank you very much again for your very, very good presentation. And now, yes, we are running on time. Let me introduce to our chair of the Board of Governors, Mr. Daniel Gamba, who is also the head of fundamental equities, the co-head of fundamental equities at BlackRock. Daniel Gamba is from Latin America and is the first chair on the history of CFA Institute coming from this region, and especially from Peru, which is my country. So we are very proud about the role that Daniel has. Go ahead, Daniel, with your closing words.
Hello. As your first CFA Institute board chair from Latin America, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to address you, for your support as part of the Atlantic Islands and Latin America Advisory Council, and for your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion and our Women in Investment Management program. Let me update you with 3 key priorities from our board. Number 1, operations resilience. It's incredible, but it's been a year since we closed our CFA Institute office in Charlottesville. We have navigated through increased complexity and change given the global pandemic, the global economic crisis, and the major disruption to our investment management and educational industries. The pandemic continues to hit us close to home. We have lost relatives, friends, from employees on the CFA Institute, from society members, and from volunteers. Our prayers are with all of them. We're also facing many professionals reconsidering whether or not they want to stay in financial services. This is really a crisis. Many people deciding to move away from financial services into new industries with better work-life balance. The impact to CFA Institute finances has been enormous. Just think about it. After multi-year revenue and candidate growth, we administered the exam in 2020 to only a quarter of the number of people we administered in 2019. We had 55,000 people who took the exam. We also canceled the June exam, and we were not able to offer the exam to levels 2 and level 3 for the first year in many, many, many years. So what are we doing? We strengthen our governance on the board through the addition of a risk committee, addition of a governance committee, and we also added a strategy SWAT team. We also increased the momentum on talent by adding diversity, equity, and inclusion into our mandate for the People and Culture Committee, which replaced our Compensation Committee. We also strengthened our Society's Advisory Council with active engagement and more participation from the President's Council representatives. So we have also now created a partnership between the chairs of the different committees, the LT, and the CEO to navigate change on a monthly basis. So what have we done? We approved computer-based testing for level 1 beginning in February, and levels 2 and level 3 beginning in May of 2021. You might remember this has been over a year before the initial commitment to do it. We have also recently approved the use of remote proctoring. You have all been demanding this. We will have remote proctoring in May for the first time as a pilot test to a few people who are unable to take the exam due to lockdowns. We also supported restructuring for the CFA Institute because as we were evolving, we need to evolve also the model of the CFA Institute. We needed to change some of the staff members who were dedicated to the pencil and paper exam because we're moving into computer-based testing. We also supported the hires of new managing directors, including a new managing director for regions and society. For the first time, we approved the use of our reserves to fund our 2021 budget. We are using $43 million from the reserves and plan to use more so that we can navigate this crisis. On a very positive note, in February, we were able to offer the exam to 30,000 candidates using computer-based testing that was tested in many places. And we plan to offer the exam to many more people in May. Let me give you an update to society and volunteer support. So the pandemic also affected societies quite a lot. We have reduced our renewal rates. We had cancellations of many events, including SLCs and including the annual global conference. And we also are supporting the societies. We supported societies in 2021 by funding them at the same levels as 2020, and we plan to do the same with operational budgets in 2022, despite dramatic reductions in our income in the CFA Institute. We also hired, as I mentioned, a head of societies and regions. His first priority is going to be to align the priorities of CFA Institute with those of the societies. So what's the role of the CFA Institute and the role of the societies on fulfilling our mission of the CFA Institute? So let me update with the third message on CFA relevance. So our vision is to lead our investment management industry in education, ethics, and professional development. To do that, we need to adapt to an ever-changing industry, which is adding ESG, climate factors, data, private, etc., to generate outperformance. So how are we going to do this? Clearly, we need to evolve, and people are demanding that we also evolve in our offering. So I'm very pleased to see that the CFA Institute is evolving to change, is becoming more relevant, and we are starting to prioritize some areas of intellectual capital. First, we're prioritizing sustainability. As you saw from the news, we acquired the rights to deliver the ESG credential from the CFA Society UK, and that's going to be exported and is going to be offered globally to all our candidates who want to have a credential on ESG. Also, I think you're familiar with the ESG products standards that we put for review, and that is going to be available so that we can have standards similar to what we have in GIPS for ESG. And we're also supporting the expansion of DEI initiatives, including women of asset management like today. What else are we doing? We have many think tanks at the CFA Institute. We have Future Finance, we have CFA Research Foundation, we have FAJ, we have advocacy teams. So for the first time, we're starting to get them together, and we're getting what are their goals, so that we can align those goals to the goals of our societies and the goals of the Institute. So there's no question in my mind that we're at a critical juncture at CFA Institute. We need our collective best thinking like the one from this council today. Together, I'm sure we will succeed. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address to you. Have a great day.
We are on time. Just to remind you that this event will be online in our YouTube channel. So anytime that you want to share or visit again the presentation, it will be on the YouTube channel. I also want to comment that this is the first webinar of our Advocacy Council for Latam and Atlantic Island. We will do a webinar each month. Next month, we will have policy series seminar for Brazil and Argentina. In May, we are a very active month with GIPS webinar, Capital Markets Development webinar. In June, we are doing an ESG webinar, again policy series in August, the asset owner series in September, retirement and pension funds in October, and ethics and governance in November. So we are keeping very busy in our region to create the most impact as possible from our members and from our volunteers across the 13 CFA societies of Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much for your participation, to our speakers, to our moderator, Sarah, Daniel, Mark. It has been a pleasure again share this important webinar. Thank you very much to our audience too. See you next time, next month. Bye-bye.